All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. It is a great schos, Baruch Hashem, to be here with all of you and to be able to begin the new parak of Maseches Nazir together. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar. Teri Czinn for dedicating all the Shimon Drashos this month in memory of Teri's father, Dr. Kahn, Tzvi Hirsh ben Yosef HaKohen on the occasion of his 10th yahrzeit. We thank Paul and Kathy Pollack, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar, for dedicating all the Shimon Drashos this month in memory of Paul's grandfather, Zechariah ben Zechariah, and his grandmother, Dinah bas Dov. Our week of learning sponsors, Yehudah and Bracha Buchwalter, for dedicating all of the shiurim this week in the schos of the neshama of Usher, Zelig ben Yaakov, Yehudah, HaLevi, Buchwalter, whose Shloshim. Shloshim is Friday, the 3rd of Adar. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. Rabbi, with that, let us begin. So we, as I mentioned before, we are starting at the beginning of the new parak, a really exciting daf of Gemara ahead of us today. So Rabbi, today's daf is Lamed Aleph 31, and we are picking up in Yahrzeit Hashem at the Mishnah on Lamed Amud Beis 30b. So the Mishnah says as follows: a really fascinating sugya that has a ramification by Naziros, but ultimately is not solely about Naziros. So the Mishnah says as follows: Beis Shammai Omrim, Hekdish Taos Hekdish. Beis Shammai says that even a mistaken Hekdish. Now we'll discuss the parameters of this statement, but what it sounds like over here is that a person is making something Hekdish by accident. I'm consecrating something accidentally. And the Mishnah tells me that even an accidental consecration, according to Beis Shammai, is a valid consecration. Namely, the item is consecrated. Top of Lamed Aleph 31, Beis Hillel say, Ein Hekdish. Beis Hillel says, no, Halacha l'maisa, a mistaken Hekdish does not create a valid consecration. Okay, so what's the case? Ketzad. So here's the Mishnah's case. Now, both say the case itself is intriguing, as we're going to see. Ketzad. Amar shar shachar shiyatzami beisi rishon hariyu hekdish. It's the following case. We'll call him Ruvain. So Ruvain says the first black ox. Or actually, let's go ahead and shar shachar shiyatzami beisi. The black ox which walks out of my house first. Harehu hekdish. That ox is hekdish. Okay. First black, all right, the black ox that walks out of my house first will be hekdish. Okay, fine. Now what happens? The yatsa lavan. So now what happens? A white ox walks out of his house first. So what's the halacha? The halacha is, I'm sorry, let me just shut something off here. Okay, good. So fine. So good. One more time. What's the case? So Ruvain says, the black ox that walks out of my house first ultimately should be hekdish. The yatsa lavan, but a white ox walks out first. So what's the halacha? Beis Shammai omrim hekdish. Beis Shammai says it's hekdish. Now we'll say, what it sounds like over here is, Beis Shammai is saying that the white ox is going to be hekdish. A white ox is going to be hekdish. Or Beis Hillel omrim, Beis Hillel say, ain't no hekdish. Beis Hillel says, no, it's not hekdish. Okay, so we'll say, so now the Gemara is framing the case ultimately here of hekdish taos, mistaken hekdish. So once again, I say, the black ox that walks out of my house first will be hekdish. Only one little detail, a white ox walks out first. Beis Shammai says, it's hekdish. Beis Hillel says, it's not hekdish. Okay, fine. Next, another case. Dinar zav shiyale biyadi rishon, hareyu hekdish. The gold dinar that I pick up first will be hekdish. Va'ala shel kasef, and I end up picking up a silver dinar first. So Beis Shammai omrim hekdish. Beis Shammai says, presumably, the silver dinar is considered to be hekdish. Or Beis Hillel omrim eino hekdish. Beis Hillel says, no, it's not hekdish. Okay, that's case 2. Case 3. Chavis shel yayin shetale biyadi rishona. Right? I say the barrel of wine that I pick up first will be hekdish. Hari hekdish. Va'alsa shel shemen. But I end up picking up a barrel of oil first. What's the halacha? Beis Shammai omrim hektish. Beis Shammai says it's hektish. Ubeis Hillel omrim eino hektish. And Beis Hillel says, ultimately, again, it's not hektish. So therefore, I will say, fundamental machlokas. A person makes an item hektish by accident. And I will say, the way that the Mishnah seems to be framing these cases is, I had in mind to make one item hektish. It turns out that I picked up another item. Beis Shammai says, a mistaken declaration of hektish is effective and binding. Beis Hillel says it is not. Okay, so now let's analyze the case a little bit. So says the Gemara, Beis Shammai omrim hektish. My time out the Beis Shammai. So we'll say, what is Beis Shammai's logic? In other words, remember, in general, hektish is the act of consecrating something to the Beis Hamikdash. So why would Beis Shammai say that halacha l'maisa, a mistaken declaration, would be binding? In other words, what's the logic of that statement? To which the Gemara says, Dialfinon tchilas hektish misov hektish. This is very interesting because they learn out the beginning process of hektish. I should say they learn out the beginning of the process of hektish from the end of the process of hektish. Now, I will say, when I understand what beginning of the process of hektish is, right? What's the beginning of the process of hektish? That's when a person is makdish something, right? The beginning of the process of hektish is when you declare something as consecrated. What's the end of the process of hektish? So we'll say over here, the Gemara is referring to that as the process of temura. Remember again, what's temura? Temura means you're makdish an item. That's right, I consecrate an animal. This animal is going to be an ola. And then I decide to go ahead and swap animal A for animal B. That's called temura, a forbidden swapping. And halacha l'maisa, again, the halacha is that both animals are considered to be kodesh. So now watch this. So Beis Shammai says, we learn out the initial consecration from temura. What does this mean? Here we go. Ma temura, afilu b'taos, av hektish afilu b'taos. Beis Shammai says, it's actually very interesting. What happens if halacha l'maisa you accidentally perform an act of temura? Right? In other words, if you take a quick look at the rush for just a moment, so the rush is in the left-hand margin, misov hektish, temura kari sov hektish, lefi shekdushasa by mikach acheres. So once again, the rush is just bringing down that temura is called the end of hektish. So look at the next rush. Ma temura afilu b'taos kidaminan b'temura paragish karbanos yiyah l'rabo shogeg kemezid. Umefarish Rabbi Yochanan Hasan kisavar lomar shar shachar va'amar lavan kisavar lomar temuras olav va'amar temuras shlamim. Rabbi said it's actually a fascinating case. If you accidentally made something a temura. Now, again, the way the Gemara actually frames the case is you had in mind to make something a temura for an ola, but instead you made it a temura for a shlamim. So the halacha is, it works. So just like shogeg works, and what we call at the end of hektish, by temura, right? You make a mistake in the way you swap out an animal, but yet the swap is still binding and you're in violation of temura. So too a mistake will work at the beginning of hektish as well. And even if you meant to be makdish one thing, but it turns out that you're makdish another thing, your act of hektish will work and will be binding. That's the logic of Beis Shammai. Fascinating idea. Beis Hillel say, Hani mili temura. Avalachuse hektish b'taos lo machtina. Beis Hillel says, what are you talking about? Why are you linking the initial process of consecration with the process of temura? Okay, by temura there's a different drasha. By temura there's a drasha that says that even if you meant to make one item, or you intended to make one type of temura, but you inadvertently made another type of temura, that your temura designation is binding. But that Beis Hillel says, why does that have anything to do with initial consecration? Initial consecration only works if it's done b'kavana, done with intention, and ultimately, again, done in the way that a person had, done with intention, done with the way the person intended to execute. But if a person ultimately, again, was makdish something b'taos, it doesn't work. So therefore, I will say, what's coming out over here is the Gemara saying like this. Let's take a step back. We have a fundamental machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about hektish b'taos. You consecrate something, and you consecrate it with a mistake, b'shogeg. Right? It's not really b'shogeg, but you had intention to consecrate an item in one way, but circumstances materialized in a different way. You had in mind to go ahead and be makdish, the first ox that would be black, the first black ox that would come out of your home to be hektish. It turns out that a white ox came out. So Beis Shammai will say the white ox is kodesh. What's the logic? Because essentially hektish is comprised of bookends. There's the initial consecration, and what we would call the final stage in hektish, although it's illegal, is temura. Just like temura can be accomplished even b'shogeg. You meant to make an animal a temura for an olah, but instead you made it a temura for a shlomim. That temura works. So just like the end process of hektish is accomplished even b'taos, so too the beginning process of hektish is accomplished b'taos as well. Beis Hillel says, why are you linking those two things? They have nothing to do with each other. While I will agree with you that in Temura, if you make an animal a Temura b'shogeg, the Temura designation works. When it comes to actively designating something as Kodesh, it only becomes Kodesh if your intention materializes. But if your originally articulated intention does not materialize, the Kodesh, the Hektish status is not created. Fine. So that's machlokes. So the Gemara says, Beis Shammai, ma ilu amar harei tachazel lechatzi hayom. It's interesting about this. Now the Gemara says, what about the following case? Beis Shammai. Let's say a person were to say, animal A should be a temura for animal B, but the temura should only take place at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, midday. So the Gemara says, mi havya temura mi ahi shaita. Would the temura designation take place immediately? Of course not. Ela adim mati chatzi hayom hu dahavya temura. Again, he'll say, this is actually interesting kasha. If a person were to say, I want animal B to be a temura for animal A at midday. So they say, Beis Shammai, do you say that the temura takes place immediately? No, when does the temura take place? At midday. So too the Gemara says over here, if a guy says, the first black ox, right? The black ox that comes out of my house first should be hektish. So why does hektish devolve upon the first ox, which is white, that comes out of the house? In other words, we'll say, just think about the case of the Mishnah for just a moment. I say, the lashon of the Mishnah is, the black ox, which comes out of my house first, should be hektish. What happens? A white ox walks out of my house. Beis Shammai says, the white ox is hektish. The Gemara says, why? Why? In other words, if a person were to say, my animal should be a temura at midday, would anyone say that the temura is accomplished now? Let's say now it's at 6:08 in the morning. Would a person say, the temura takes place now? No, a person would say the temura takes place at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So too, if a person said, the black ox that comes out of my house first, even if a white ox comes out first, the truth is, the animal should not become kodesh until a black ox comes out of my house. That's what I articulated. Why does the white ox, which comes out first, become kodesh? What's going on over here? Rapapa says it's actually very interesting. If you look at Rashi for just a moment, Rashi says the Kach ne'emar rishon. Rashi says, we'll come back to that. So, good. Let's see. Rapapa, the Kach ne'emar rishon, l'chishiyatza rishon. So the Gemara, listen to this. So Rapapa says, no. Look at what he said. The guy said, Shor shachar shiyatza mi beisi rishon. So Beis Hillel says, really the emphasis over here is on Rishon. What's my intention? My intention is really to go ahead and consecrate the first animal which comes out of my house. That's really the intention over here. Therefore, although I said black, Lamaisa, the emphasis was really on the first ox that came out. What was the first ox that came out in this case? It was a white ox. And therefore the white ox is going to be Kodesh. If you take a look at Rashi for just a moment. So Rashi says over here, We'll come to the Rashi also. The Kach ne'emar rishon, the haki ka'amar shachar rishon, sheyetzi hektish demashma de islei shvarim shchorin harbe, ba'alayu samcha daiti, the haki amar shar shachar sheyetzi rishon, mishar shvarim shchorin hektish, k'shiyatza shachar achra lavan, hari yatza rishon, l'shar shvarim. So we'll say, so now watch this. So actually, this is very interesting. So actually, before we get to Rashi, so the Gemara says, I v'ha shar shachar ka'amar. But one second. So now we're suggesting that according to Beis Shammai, what really happens over here is like this. The guy, what am I saying in the Mishnah? The black ox, which comes out of my house first. So we always thought up until now that the emphasis was on black. It turns out, says Rav Papa, what's the emphasis on? The emphasis is on first. The emphasis is on first. That's really what the emphasis is on. And therefore, again, when the first one comes out, ultimately, again, even though it's white, that's what's going to be hekdesh. I says the Gemara, but 1 second, v'hashar shachar kamar, but I said a black ox. Obviously, again, I wasn't just saying a black ox for no reason. To which the Gemara says, Milo askinan the lesle elahai. Are we not talking about where maybe the guy only has one black ox? L'tzicha de esle train telasa. It could very well be where he has 2 or 3 black oxes. Ubesilel imkain shiyatza berisham ibayile. So Rabbi will say, Beis Hillel disagrees with Beis Shammai. So here's what's interesting. So according to Rav Papa says, really, Beis Shammai holds that what's happening over here is the guy's really makbid to say that Allah Lamaisa, the first ox that comes out, ultimately again should be hagdish. Now, I will say, what's interesting is the way Rashi understands Rav Papa's answer over here is as follows. Now look at Rashi. Look, kach ne'emar rishon, the hachi ka'amar shachar rishon sheyetze yehei hekdish, the mashma de isle shvarim shchorin harbe. The way Rashi understands this case is as follows. We're talking about a guy who has multiple black oxes. So what happens? The isle shvarim shchorin harbe, va'alayu samchadaite the hachi amar, shor shachar, l'chesheyetze rishon mishar shvarim shchorin yehei hekdish. Ukishiyatza shachar achar halavan hare yatza rishon l'shar shvarim shchorin v'glai milsa da'alei k'amar v'lo alavan. So I will say, this is actually pretty wild. So Rav Papa says, if we just frame this according to Rashi, again, the Rashi has a little bit of a different understanding here, we'll go with Rashi, that what Rav Papa is saying is like this. Really what the guy is saying is, listen, he's got a couple of black oxes. And what he says is, the first of my black oxes to come out, ultimately, again, will be Kodesh. And therefore, when Beis Shammai says, ultimately is Kodesh, he means the first black ox to come out amongst the black oxen, ultimately, again, will be Kodesh. Beis Hillel says, here's the problem. If that's what he really meant to say, he shouldn't have said the first. Remember, the lashon of the Mishnah was Shor Shachar Sheyetzei Beis Rishon. The first, right, the black ox that comes out of my house first. So, which sounds like he's talking about the first ox that comes out. If he's talking about the first black ox amongst my multiple black oxen, he should have said Sheyetzei Birishon, not Sheyetzei Rishon. Okay. Amarli Rav Meir. So what's that? Rav Papa. We're going to see a couple of different interpretations. Amarli Rav Meir and Shavashi. Hi hektish b'taosu, hektish b'kavanahu. But 1 second. If that's the case, then this is not a case of hektish b'taos. This is a case, ultimately, again, of hektish b'kavana. He has specific intent about the first black ox amongst the black oxen. Mishum da'atye lidibure kamo. To which ultimately, again, the problem over here, says the Gemara, is that his wording is misleading. That's ultimately, again, what's the problematic. Remember, again, essentially, what's problematic over here is, on one hand, he's saying shor shachar, and on the other hand, he's saying rishon. So the difficulty over here is, where is his hakpada? Is he focusing ultimately over here on the blackness of the ox, the black ox? Or is he focusing over here ultimately on the first item to come out of his home? So we'll say, are we saying now? So we'll say, here's what I want to point out. According to Rav Papa, this is not really a case of hekdish b'taos, right? According to Rav Papa, the way they're interpreting Beis Shammai's statement is, the guy's multiple black oxen, and he says, the first of my black oxes to come out of my home is going to be hekdish. That's what he means to say. And halacha l'maisa, when the first black ox comes out, that's the one that's going to be kodesh. So it sounds like, according to Rav Papa, this is not a case of hekdish b'taos, in which case, again, perhaps, according to Rav Papa, Beis Shammai does not hold that hekdish b'taos is called hekdish. To which the Gemara says, "V'savri Beis Shammai hekdish tos lo havi hekdish." We learn. Let's listen to this. Mishin Adar ben Nazir v'nishol lechachamim v'tiro. Listen to this. Guy became a Nazir. Call him Ruvain. Ruvain became a Nazir. And I will say, what happened? remember, you can get out of your neder naziros through hataras nedarim. So Reuven becomes a nazir, and then ultimately again he goes to a chacham for hataras nedarim. The chacham releases him from the neder. V'haisala behema mufurashes. Now, if I go back to our previous sugya, he had already set aside an animal for his karban, for his concluding neder naziros. So what's the halacha? I will say now, once he has hataras nedarim for his neder naziros, teitze v'tira beider. But remember, we learned this halacha that as long as the animal was unspecified and not specifically set aside for anything, then what's the halacha? Once there is hataras nedarim, ultimately again the animal is unconsecrated and just simply goes back, joins the rest of the flock. Amru beis Hillel beis Shammai. So ultimately, again, so Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, don't you agree that this is a case of hektish b'taos? Right? But nevertheless, even though it is a case of hektish b'taos, the animal should still be able to go back and just rejoin the rest of the flock. Then I will say, the fact that Beis Hillel says that the Shammai tells you what Michlal, the Savrei Beis Shammai, hektish b'taos, have hektish. So it could very well be this case might be a little bit different, but the fact that Beis Hillel says that Beis Shammai indicates to us that Beis Shammai does hold hektish b'taos, mistaken hektish is binding. Then I will say, that seems to go against the way Rav Papa set up the Mishnah, to which the Gemara says, Ella, Beis Hillel hu dekato. It's rather no. Gemara says no. Beis Hillel is actually mistaken about Beis Shammai's svara. They thought Sarvi Tamar the Beis Shammai Mishum the Hektish B'Daos Have Hektish. Beis Hillel thought that Beis Shammai's logic, that Beis Shammai actually holds that mistaken Hektish is binding, and what? But in reality, V'Amru Beis Shammai love Mishum Hektish B'Daosu. So ultimately, again, Beis Shammai said back to Beis Hillel, no, in fact, we agree with you that hektish b'taos is not hektish. So we'll say very interesting. So now, with the way the Gemara is coming out over here is everyone agrees that mistaken hektish is not binding. So what's happening with Beis Shammai in the Mishnah? What's happening with Beis Shammai in the Mishnah, I will say, is ambiguous wording. What ultimately, again, what the guy really means to say is the first of my black oxen which comes out will ultimately be Kodesh, but they do not mean to go ahead and in any way say that Hektish B'Tos is Hektish. I just want to show you, if you take a quick look at the Rush, so I will say, so we are Da'ati L'Dibre in the wide lines of the Rush, again, left-hand margin, 4 lines in. Mishum da'ati l'dibure shedibura eino mashma kol kach lehedja kimo shebeis Shammai mefarshim oso ulahachi kar lehekdish b'taos kilomar hekdish shedome kitsas l'taos al mefurashim devarav v'lo havi taos v'kadosh. So I will say, this is incredibly important. The way Rav Papa is totally reinventing the Mishnah, right? Let's just take a pause for a moment and just understand what's happening over here. When we were introduced to this in the Mishnah, this sugya in the Mishnah framed this as a fundamental machlokus Yeshana Beis Hillel about hektish b'taos. And we thought what we're discussing over here is a person mistakenly consecrates something. So we thought, and Beis Shammai says, even a mistaken consecration is binding. Beis Hillel says, no, it's not. Rav Papa says, that's not the case here. In fact, Rav Papa says, everyone agrees hektish b'taos is not hektish. A mistaken consecration is in fact not a binding consecration. That's what everyone is going to hold over here. So what's happening in the Mishnah? What's happening in the Mishnah, I will say, is a guy who's not speaking clearly. See, this is what happens. You don't speak clearly, right? You don't articulate your intentions clearly and concisely. So ultimately, again, you create confusion. So that's what's happening over here. The guy is creating confusion. And at the end of the day, what's occurring over here is that halacha l'maisa, what he really means to say is like this. He's got a couple of black oxen, right? A couple of black oxen. And what he means to say is the first of my black oxen which come out of my home will be Kodesh. And that's it. And in fact, Beis Shammai is going to say that's going to work. That Lamaisa is going to work. What's the problem? The problem is he didn't phrase it that way. He's making it sound like the black ox which comes out of my house first. So which one is it? Black or first? What is it that matters to you? So Beis Shammai says this is a problem of ambiguous lashon. But Lamaisa, according to Rav Papa, even Beis Shammai is going to agree that a mistaken act of hektish does not create binding consecration. Incredible. So the Gemara challenges this again. We'll say 2 lines up from the bottom, 31a, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph. Sorry, Beis Shammai Hekdesh, Shos Lo Have Hekdesh. So now you're telling me Beis Shammai holds that mistaken consecration or accidental consecration is not binding. What about the following? Tashma. Let's listen to this case. Hayu Mahalchim Adar is a great case. A group of guys are walking together on the road. Walking together on the road. We'll say Amad Beis. The echad ba kinegdan. So we'll say, if you can imagine the following situation, right? If you have a chevra, it's actually going to be a chevra of 5 guys, right? 5 guys. And what happens? The chevra is walking, and they see Ruvain, or I should say, they see someone approaching them. The echad ba kinegdan. Watch this. Va'amar echad harini Nazir shezeh ploni. So we'll say, what happens? Guy number 1 says, I'm a Nazir if that guy walking towards us is Ruvain. Okay. Fine. The echad omer harini Nazir she'ein zeploni. Second guy says, I'm a Nazir if that's not Ruvain walking towards us. Third guy says, harini Nazir she'echad mikem Nazir. Third guy says, listen, I'll be a Nazir if one of you 2 guys is correct and become a Nazir. Fourth guy says, she'ein echad mikem Nazir. Fourth guy says, I'll be a Nazir if neither of you first 2 guys are Nazirim, right? Ultimately, again, 5th guy says, Sheshnechem Nazirim, I'll become a Nazir if both of you become Nazirim. And 6th guy says, Shekulchem Nazirim, I'll become a Nazir if all of you are Nazirim. Okay, fine. So I'll say, so what happens over here? So Beis Shammai says, Kulam Nazirim. Beis Shammai says, well, this is incredible. Beis Shammai says, the whole chevra, they're all Nazirim. They're all Nazirim. Now we'll say, now what's going on over here? Now what is this a case of? Now remember, this is a case of hektish b'taos. Now why is this case of hektish b'taos? We'll say, take a quick look. Take a look at the rush. So the rush, we'll say, is in the right hand margin. If you see Tosfos Amru, and you just move your finger to the right and go 2 lines up, you'll be right at the rush. So watch this. The Rush says, Kol avav she'etfisu kulam nazirim va'avagav de nazir to'osu sheshnaim harishonim machishim zeh. And I will say, now here's what's interesting. It's impossible for all of them to be nazirim, right? Now, why? On a technical level, why? Because remember again, what did the first 2 guys say? Guy number 1 said, if the person approaching us is Ruvain, I'm a Nazir. Guy number 2 said, if the guy approaching us is not Ruvain, I'm a Nazir. So by definition, both of them cannot be correct, which means that technically speaking, both of them cannot become Nazirim. Shema echad Nazir ein abeis Nazir v'divrei hevival. So we'll say, so what's happening? Well, for who I did hektish b'taos shor shachar shos v'esi rishon v'yatz alavan afagav lonas kaimu. So we'll say, now watch this. So the Gemara says, so what is this a case of? The fact that Beis Shammai says they're all Nazirim essentially means that hektish b'taos have hektish. That when you mistakenly consecrate something, ultimately again, it is consecrated. So according to Beis Shammai, listen, you guys made yourselves Nazirim. You made this tonight, you made that tonight. I don't care. I don't care about that tonight. Ultimately, again, your Tanai is considered to be like a toast, like a mistake, and you're all Nazirim. So, according to this approach, halacha l'maisa, when Ruvain says, right, the black ox which comes out of my house first is going to be hektish, and a white ox comes out, Beis Shammai will hold that it's the white ox that is going to be kodesh because hektish b'taos have hektish. So, just the point, this is arguing on Rav Papa, to which the Gemara says, Amri Safri Beis Shammai hektish b'taos have hektish hachalo. So we'll say, see, here's what's interesting. Take a quick look at the Rush for just a moment. Once again, so I will say, so now listen to this. So the Bach changes the gears over a little bit. He says, b'taos have hektish mehacha mehahi lo. So look at the Rush for just a moment. So the Rush says, Amri hacha b'divrei Beis Shammai hektish tos havi hektish hasam lo me'ahid nazirim vaday ikala mashma desarvi hachi the hasam vaday nazir b'tosu the ka'amar the kulu nazirim mishum the kulu le nazir ichavein ve'afshar dechol echad hayotay v'hayasavar de'afshar lios kidvarav v'hotzi b'fiv kabbalas nazir v'azdinon basar piv v'afagav the toahu midi dahavi atmur. So listen to this. So the Gemara wants to suggest as follows. It could very well be that in the case of Nazirim, Beis Shammai will say hektish b'taos, namely, because Rabbi will say, in this case, they're all undertaking a neder nazirus, and they're all assuming that what they're saying is true, right? Guy number one is confident that the person walking towards them is Ruvain. Guy number two is confident the person walking towards them is not Ruvain. Each of them is confident in the statement that they're making. So it could be in a case like that, Beis Shammai would say, in fact, hektish b'taos have hektish. That ultimately, again, this should be a valid act of consecration. It actually should work. But I will say, but the Gemara wants to suggest that's different than our Mishnah. Why is it different than our Mishnah? So finish up in the Rush. He says, "Midi daviat mur kisavar gelomar shor shachar va'amar lavan aval masnisin lekale ferushim mishum hektish betos to lo dami letmur kit mafur shleil el mishum lemitartzi beishamay lemilsei derishon l'shchorim." He'll say, but the Mishnah could be interpreted differently. You see, what the Gemara is suggesting is like this. In the case of the Nazirim, Beis Shammai will in fact say hektish betos have hektish, and therefore they're all going to be Nazirim because they all feel that the statement that they are making is absolutely and unequivocally true, and therefore halacha l'maisa, they're all going to be Nazirim. They will say the case of the Mishnah, however, could be understood in a different way, like Rav Papa said it. How do you understand the Mishnah? The case of the Mishnah is talking about a guy who has multiple black oxen. And what does he mean? What does he mean to say? He means to say the first of my black oxen, which comes out of my home, will be hektish. The first one will be hektish. He phrased it in the wrong way, but ultimately, again, that's what he meant to say. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, that's how we interpret it, not the case of hektish betos. Fine. So we'll say, what the Gemara is just suggesting is as follows. I'm sorry, I realized that for some reason my Zoom picture is freezing. It's always interesting. I'm sure it's quite entertaining to see how the picture freezes, sometimes in the most awkward poses. But okay, I'm sure there's good fodder for a Purim spiel over here for someone. In any event, so the Gemara goes weiter. So what the Gemara is suggesting is as follows. What the Gemara is suggesting is that it's such a good musar if you think about it. Like we just learned Mesilas Yesharim. What did we learn? V'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nechtaven. Everything you do is recorded. So if you could imagine, like every moment of life that we live is like a freeze frame before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So can you imagine? The person has to live life thinking about if my image were to be frozen right now in what it is that I'm doing, would I be happy with that? Right? In other words, the freeze frame of whatever it is that I'm doing, would I be able to stand behind that action? Would I be confident and comfortable knowing that the Rebbe Shalom is seeing that? Yeah, there's Musar and everything, even a slow internet connection for Zoom. Okay, well, so with that, let's go weiter. So what the Gemara is suggesting is as follows. What the Gemara is suggesting is that halacha l'maisa, maybe Beis Shammai in fact does hold hektish b'taos have hektish. Most is very important. So a little bit different than Rav Papa. Rav Papa was suggesting that Beis Shammai does not hold hektish b'taos have hektish, that a mistaken consecration could be binding. Here, what we're suggesting is that no, mistaken consecration can be binding, but the Mishnah is not a case of hektish b'taos. Fine. Rabbi says, Lo kasakadaitcha dikaim b'tzafra, elahacha b'mayaskinon, dikaim b'tira, va'amar shar shachar shiyetzim b'isi rishon, lehavi hektish. So we'll say, this is actually very interesting. The Gemara says, we'll say, Abaye says, how did we imagine this case up until this point? We'll say, how did we imagine? So we imagined ultimately again that I'm standing, right? How did we imagine the case of the Mishnah? It's morning, right? I'm standing at my home. And what do I say? The black ox which comes out of my home first will be hektish. So really what I'm making is an anticipatory statement. Something's going to happen over the course of the day, and I'm making an anticipatory statement. Abaye says maybe not. Literally what Abaye says is, Lo chasakadaytcha dekain b'tzafra. Don't assume, as you may have assumed before, that we're talking about a guy who's standing there making this declaration in the morning. Elhacham asking him, what's the case? Dekain b'tira. He's standing in the afternoon. Tira literally means, Rashi points out over here, Tzaharaim. He's standing in the afternoon. Va'amar shar shachar sheyatsa mi beisi rishon lehavi hekdish. Fascinating. You're both saying, maybe this is not a proscriptive statement, but rather like a future statement, but rather a retrospective statement. Meaning what? I'm standing in the afternoon. A whole bunch of oxen already came out of my house. White ones, black ones. And I say, the first of the black oxen, which already came out, should be hekdish. Oh, so we'll say different case. Different case. This is not prospective, right? This is not me standing in the morning saying what's going to happen, but rather this is me going ahead and shedding light on what already happened. The first black ox which came out of my house, that ox should be hekdish. To which the Gemara says, now watch this, va'amrulei, lava nafak, and then they say to me, look, you know what? Silber, bad news. Well, not bad news, but just news. No black oxen came out of your house today, only white oxen. Va'amr lahon, and I say, ihavi yedana the lava nafak lo amri shachar. Okay, had I realized that it was going to be white oxen that would come out of my house, I wouldn't have said black, I would have said white, or I wouldn't have said anything. So Rabbi says, so now this is a dramatically different case. Right? This is a dramatically different case. In fact, if you look at the Rush, the Rush says over here, Amar Shorshach B'Shetzik V'Amar Beisi Rishon Yehi Kodesh V'Amar Lei Lavan Nafak V'Amar Ila Yisi Yodesh Yatza Lavan Rishon Hayisi Omer Lavan. So Rabbi said, this is interesting. So the Rush's girsa is like this. Actually, what happens here is I'm standing at the end of the day, and I say the black ox that had already come out of my house first should be hekdish. And then they tell me, by the way, no black ox came out of your house. Only a white ox came out of your house. Now, the girsa of the Rush is, then I say, had I known that, I would have said white ox and not black ox. I would have said white ox and not black ox. So now the Rush says, so I'll say, so now this is different. So now I'll say, what's happening over here is, it becomes clear that my emphasis really was on Rishon and not on color. So in fact, the color didn't matter, right? The color didn't matter when I was making this declaration. What really mattered was first. So I will say, so now, see here what's happening. So I will say, it's just totally different reframing of the case. Again, not a prospective statement, but a retrospective statement. The black ox which already came out of my house first should be Kodesh. I'm then told no black ox came out, only a white ox. I say, okay. Had I known that, I would have said white ox. To which the Gemara says, now watch this. So the Gemara says, fine. And I say, had I known that a white ox would come out, I would have never said black. Or according to the Rush, I would have said white. So I'll say that's the case. And therefore, in that case, Beis Shammai says the white ox is consecrated, and Beis Hillel says it's not. But one second, we're going to see the problem is, so you're telling me now, we're talking about a case of a guy who's standing there in the afternoon and making a retrospective statement. V'hakatani, Rabbi say, look at the rest of the cases in the Mishnah. V'hakatani, dinar shalzav shiyale. So I'll say, but it says, what was the second case? I say, you know what? The gold dinar that I pick up first should be Kodesh. That I pick up is a prospective, is a future statement. So what do you mean? What do you mean a retrospective? Which the Gemara says, you're right. Tani sha'alsa. Change it to a retrospective statement, right? And I say the first gold dinar that I already picked up. And once again, they tell me, by the way, you didn't pick up a gold dinar, you picked up a silver dinar. Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda says this. I'm sorry. But one second, what about the barrel of wine? That was the next case in the Mishnah. I say the first barrel of wine that I pick up should be hektish. And then it turns out that I picked up a barrel of oil. Tanisha also. Once again, change it to a retrospective statement, past tense. Fine. Rav Chisda. So I'll say, so therefore, just to point out over here, so Abaye is understanding it to be that I'm making a retrospective statement. It then turns out that they point out to me the statement that I made was incorrect. And I say, had I realized that it would have been a white ox that came out first, I would have said white and not black. So Beis Shammai says, in that case, the white ox is going to be consecrated. Beis Hillel says, no, the white ox is not consecrated. So we'll say now a secondary statement. Amar Rav Chisda, Uchma bechivra lakya, chivra ba'uchma lakya. So we'll say an interesting case. If you look at Rashi over here, so we'll say, so this is Rashi, it is 2, 4, 6, about 9 lines from before it gets wide. Literally translated, Amar Rav Chisda, Uchma bechivra lakya, shor shachar ben alavanim kachosh, hu deshar lavan adif tfei. So we'll say if you have a black ox living amongst white oxen, ultimately, again, the black ox is considered to be of inferior quality. So the point of it that Rav Chisda is making is the white ox is a superior ox. On the other hand, chivra ba'ochma laki, kilomar afagav l'shar lavan ma'ali afilu haki, kika ksam chivrin mimashka the Torah ochma lakusa. But if you have a white ox with black spots, apparently black spots on a white ox compromise the health of the white ox. Okay, so the Gemara says Tanan. So we'll say. So the point over here is it sounds like now the takeaway from this. So we'll say, you say, what am I supposed to do with this information? We're supposed to do the information is Rav Chisda saying a white ox is a better type of ox. And I watch this Tanan. Based on this, what do we learn in the Mishnah? We'll say Shachar Shetzim Beisi Rishon Hekdish. So we'll say now based on this, it's interesting. If a white ox is considered to be superior to a black ox, then Lemaisa again. The case of the Mishnah was, I'm saying, the black ox that comes out first from my home will be Kodesh. But if I have white oxen and black and white oxen, why would I be makdish the black ox if the white ox is superior? After all, again, kasaka daitcha ki makdish ba'ayin ro'a makdish. The Bible says this thing that when a person is makdish something, he's makdish it in a stingy way. I will say ayin ra means that I'm not makdish in the most generous fashion. Right? Ayin ra literally means stingy. So does this mean when I'm makdish something, I'm not makdish it in the most generous way? Right? I'm makdish it in a stingy way. That's I'm going to give the black ox and not the white ox. Amri Beis Shammai havi hektish. And Beis Shammai says, ultimately again, that it's hektish. So I will say, now here's what's interesting. Now remember, according to what we're saying over here, remember, my statement was, the black ox that comes out of my house first will be Kodesh. Ro said, then what happens? A white ox comes out, and what did Beis Shammai say? The white ox is going to be Kodesh. So according to Beis Shammai, what do you see from here? Ve'elamai ba'ayin gafet makdish. Ultimately, again, according to Beis Shammai, what do you see? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, according to Beis Shammai, according to Beis Shammai, you're makdish ba'ayin yofa, right? In a generous way, and therefore halacha l'maisa, the white ox becomes kodesh. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. Dinah shalzav shiala biyada rishon. If a person says the first gold dinar that I lift up should be kodesh, va'ala kesef, and I end up picking up a silver dinar. Beis Shammai omrim hekdish. Ultimately, again, Beis Shammai says it's hekdish. Now, what's hekdish? The silver. According to this, ve'alamai ba'ayin ra'a makdish. It must be that according to Beis Shammai, when you're makdish, ultimately again you're makdish in a stingier fashion. So what about the case? If I pick up a barrel of wine, the first barrel of wine I pick up should be kodesh. Va'ala shel shemen, and it turns out that what? It turns out that I pick up a barrel of oil. Beis Shammai hekdish. Beis Shammai says ultimately again the barrel is hekdish. I v'ha shemen adif miyayin. But oil is better than wine. I will say it's such a fascinating statement, right? Oil is more valuable than wine. To which the Gemara says, "Imishum halo kasha." It's not a question. Begalila shaminu. We're supposed to have about a case in the Galil. The chamra adif mimishcha. In the Galil, apparently, again, there was more oil than wine, and therefore wine was more expensive than oil. To which the Gemara says, "Reisha kash Rav Chisda." But I will say, here's the problem. What do we do according to the Reisha? The first case according to Rav Chisda. Ultimately, again, why would Beis Shammai say that halacha l'maisa, the first, right, that the white ox is hagdish? Amar l'cha Rav Chisda ki amri bitura de karmenoi. What are we talking about over here? Ultimately, we're talking about a special type of ox, a karmenoin tura, right? Literally, again, a karmenoin ox, a karmenoi ox. That ultimately, again, this was considered to be halacha l'maisa, a more valuable ox. So we'll say, so the Rosh says over here, Shushava Yoser. So therefore, our Mishnah Movas al Stam Shar Lavan. Aval Adam Makdish Ba'ayin Ra. So we'll say it's quite possible that ultimately, again, we're talking about a Kamenoy ox. A Kamenoy ox is more expensive, and therefore it could very well be that in general, Adam Makdish Ba'ayin Ra. When a person is Makdish something, he's Makdish it in a more stingy fashion, and we're talking about this specialized type of ox. So Amar of Chista, Uchma L'Mashicha. Ultimately, again, a black ox is used for its hide. Sumka L'Bisra, a red ox is used for its meat. Chivra l'redia, a white ox is used for plowing. V'amar of Chista uchma b'chivra lakya. But we said before that lamaisa, again, a white ox is considered to be a superior ox. Ki amri b'tumar de kamonoi. What type of white ox is considered to be a superior ox? Kamonoi ox. Okay, so we'll say, so this is the end of the sugya. So what are we left with over here? So remember, so first of all, I'll just point out that this last machlokas that the Gemara brought up over here, of ayin ra versus ayin yafa, when a person is makdish something, what do we assume a person is being makdish? Is a person generous in their hektish and automatically is makdish the nicest thing, or do we assume that a person is stingy in their hektish and is going to be makdish, but is not going to necessarily give away the farm when they're being makdish? So that in of itself is a machlokas. Let's leave it on the side. But I will say, what do we do with the general machlokas, right? What's our general machlokas? Our general machlokas is hektish bitos. When someone makes a mistaken declaration of hektish, is that binding or not? That is the fundamental question, fundamental machlokas. So remember again, the problem we have over here is there's a machlokas if that's even a machlokas. Okay? In other words, you have the opinion of Rav Papa, who holds that no, even Beis Shammai holds hektish ta'os lo have hektish. Everyone agrees, and he reframes the Mishnah. But at least the way the Mishnah reads on a pashat level is that this is a fundamental machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So we'll say, how do we paskin? Is a mistaken hektish considered to be an active hektish or not? So we'll say the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Erchin v'Charonim Perek Zayin Halacha Lamadal. This is the conclusion of the sugya. The Rambam says, we'll say, here it is. Hektish ta'os eino hektish. That's it. The Rambam says, a mistaken declaration of hektish is not binding. And he gives an example. Ketzad, ha'omer, shar shachar shiyatza mibayis rishon, harehu hektish, v'yatza lavan, eno hektish. Abba said, Rambam explicitly quotes our case. I say, the black ox that comes out of my house first should be hektish, and it turns out that a white ox comes out first. What's the halacha? It's not hektish. It's not hektish, right? So I'll say, and now, by the way, what that's predicated on is the way the Rambam really understands that statement. The way that the halacha is that really when I'm being makdish is the first ox that comes out of my house first if it's black. So therefore, again, halacha, if it's not black but it's white, ultimately, again, it's not hektish. So I will say that's how we paskin halacha l'maisa, hektish bitos eino hektish. A mistaken consecration ultimately, again, is not binding. Now, I will share with you, and this I'll conclude. As much as we paskin hektish bitos, lo have hektish, mistaken consecration is not binding. Halacha l'maisa, hashkafa l'maisa, we paskin a little bit different. I will say there is a magnificent idea by the Lublin Rav, right? Our Rebbe, Ramir Shapiro of Lublin Rav, the founder of Daf Yomi. So Lublin Rav says as follows. We'll say he paskins. He says something amazing. What does it mean? So remember, Beis Shammai holds hektish ta'os hektish. A mistaken consecration is hektish. So Lublin Rav writes, Hainu, listen to this. Shalapamim shu mispalo shalo bekavana ve'ein piv v'libo shna. This is an incredible way to go into davening. The Lublin Rav says sometimes when we daven, we don't daven with kavana. We don't daven with kavana. In other words, I'm saying the words, but there's no kavana. He says, my mouth and my heart are not aligned. My heart has kavanah, but my mouth is just like spewing words. V'zeh nikra hekdish ta'os. So let's listen to this. The Lublin Rav says, a tefillah of davening without kavanah is like a hekdish ta'os. I'm consecrating something, but it's not a complete consecration. It's not a regular, it's a little bit of a mistaken consecration. There's a disconnect between the heart and between the mouth. And Abba say, ultimately, again, says the Lublin Rav, how do we paskin hashkafa l'maisa? Hekdish Ta'os hu hekdish. Hekdish ta'os, I like the lashon of the Mishnah. Hekdish ta'os, hekdish. Even Rabbi say, if you're consecrating something in your avodas Hashem, and your consecration is not the complete consecration. And by the way, it's not just by davening, right? It's by mitzvahs in general. Sometimes Rabbi say, behaviorally, I'm doing the things I need to be doing, but there's no heart. There's no hearts. There's no kavana. There's no zerizos. There's no excitement. There's no passion to it. So sometimes we think that if there's no kavana, there's no heart attached to my avodas Hashem, that it doesn't mean anything, that it's worthless. Comes the Lublina Rav and says, Chas v'shalom. We paskin hashkafa lemaisa hekdish ta'os hekdish. Even if it's a mistaken consecration, even if it's a tefillah without kavana, even if it's mitzvahs without kavana, even though it's not the way it should be, it's still so meaningful in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, Rabbi say, halacha lemaisa, we paskin like the Rambam, and therefore hekdish ta'os is not hekdish. Mistaken consecration is not consecration. But ashkafa l'maisa, we paskin like the Lublina Rav. And when it comes to our avodas Hashem, obviously my goal is that I should have complete hekdish, complete kavan in everything that I'm doing. But even if at the end of the day it's hekdish ta'os, and behaviorally I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but there's no kavana, there's no heart, just know hekdish ta'os, hekdish. It's still meaningful in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because by the Rebbe Shalom, as long as he sees that we're trying to do something, that I'm pushing myself in some way, that gives HaKadosh Baruch Hu tremendous nachas. Rabbi say, shkoyach, shkoyach, thank you for allowing me to still be able to learn with you even virtually. I look forward to Eretz Hashem to be back live with you in Eretz Hashem this afternoon, but in Eretz Hashem tomorrow morning for shir. And I wish everyone an incredible day. Shkoyach, Rabbi say.